Once upon a time, I was perusing my favorite fine art repository, r/DeviantArtHell, where I stumbled across the most stunning work of human expression to ever grace the earth. The raw emotion, the usage of colour and line, naught but breathtaking. 'Twas overwhelmingly glorious, especially the bee-girl thing's gorgeously long spine and stubby legs, and that slug-looking thing's endearing sassy attitude. I was compelled by a divine force to draw my own interpretation of this life-changing artwork. But alas, I needed some sick tunes, and was sick of my own music library. My only solution was to turn to the wondrous wide world of web. I hopped onto the tube of You, saw this, and thought, wowee! Uploaded an hour ago or something, I must listen! And proceeded to get immediately jump-scared. After listening to Unkillable on loop for almost 2 hours, I wound up with this, and never finished the background. I translated over the weird pentagonal wing pattern, the apparent lack of eyes, and the lumpiness of the slug thing. I believe I was able to properly capture the beauty of the bee-girl's gloriously long spine, whilst also offering a new angle to their dynamic. Except now, I couldn't get the visual of an epic chase sequence set to Unkillable out of my head. Alas, I am but a child and could never translate such a vision to reality. But then I remembered that I am an animator now. I could. So I went straight back to work. I always imagined them running around some sort of building. It changed frequently from labyrinthine hallways to a library to a pavilion to some sort of ruined throne room. But if I was going to realistically make a whole short film on less than a year of experience using free software, all within the upcoming school holidays because I'm still in school, finishing in time to render it over the beginning of the next school term, then I would need to keep it small. One main area with an interior and a less detailed exterior should work. I narrowed down my options to either a throne room or a library. I couldn't decide, so I combined the two and got a bee church. Then I couldn't think of a unique bee religion. I made some little bee statues in hopes of jogging my creativity, but then I remembered that this is just a massive shitpost anyway, so I don't have to put effort into it. I turned the bee church into a place of worship for our Lord and Savior, Barry B. Benson, drawing inspiration from the main statue from common depictions of Baphomet, and of course having his buddies Adam and Vanessa dabbing either side. Finally, the school holidays began and I could commence the modelling process. I started by experimenting with how to make honeycomb, which is why all of my test renders begin with HC for honeycomb, as I expected to have different prefixes for different models. This did not happen. I thought the most challenging part during the beginning would be to get the lighting right. But no, I dropped the yellowest part of the Halloween Kills poster, put that in the walls, and got it spot on first try. The actual most challenging part was designing the bee church, since I didn't draw any concept art beyond this, so I had to make it up as I went. You can probably tell I've never set foot in a church. Initially, I was going to have the opening take place on a grand staircase at the front, so I designed this whole area, but ultimately abandoned it in favor of the upstairs courtyard. Fun fact, there are no stairs connecting the two levels. I was also going to have beds of wilted flowers along the main entrance hall, but then I realized that was far too beyond my skill level, so I gave up. However, one of these flowers did end up right there. You may be wondering, what is this story supposed to be? Well, when I first saw this, I initially assumed the story was that they had broken into a beehive and the slug thing had fed a swarm of bees to the bee girl. Then I found the original on DeviantArt and learnt that the slug is actually a ghost that has been possessing and force-feeding the bee girl royal honey. And yes, this was made by the very infamous Kforia. The names of the original characters are Pudina and Polenya, but my characters are completely new and different, and they're called Slutty Bee and Slug. Alright, just Slug then. And apparently this artwork isn't just a single artwork. It's 2 frames from a whole animation which got taken down from YouTube and hasn't been re-uploaded anywhere. I was going to email Kforia himself to ask for a copy, but his account was recently terminated by DeviantArt for violating their rules. Which is very frustrating because I had been procrastinating that for literal years. It's a little bittersweet, because while his art style is quite unpleasant and his animations are genuinely sickening to watch, he was around for over a decade and was only doing what he loved, and I respect that. And most importantly, to me at least, he had inspired my latest passion project, which had brought a great deal of joy and purpose to my life. This does also mean that the original Bee Church animation is lost media. So about the story. Inspired by my initial assumption, Slutty Bee is some sort of monster that must constantly eat exorbitant amounts of food, or else she will shrivel up and turn into a horrific bloodthirsty machine of destruction that will consume everything in sight until she gets fat again and turns back to normal. Slutty Bee befriends Slug at some point, and they take over this beehive where there's a flourishing civilization of sapient bees. Slug helps her eat all the bees to take over the hive, and they run amok through the whole bee city, trashing the place and consuming every last morsel of food until like a day or two later when Slug finds out that all the honey has been eaten and they must now leave. Slutty Bee gets very anxious about running out of food, but Slug does not know about the whole monster transformation thing. During the early days of modeling, my favorite thing to listen to was the Shining soundtrack played in an empty hotel, and it set the mood perfectly. Whoops, the school holidays just ended. The bee church is not done. Don't worry guys, I can get it done by the end of the first week. If I just put off all my homework for now and do it next week— oh wait, that week's gone too. Week after that, I'll get it done by week 4. Week 6. No, I can get it done in time to render over the exam period. If I work on my bee church now instead of studying, I'll have all the time to study while it renders. Perfect. Well, the exams rolled around, I hadn't studied, and while I was sitting there, in the exam, the only thing going through my mind was, you still need to make open-faced books for the bee church! The bee church is all I can think about. It's all I have. This short has nothing to do with the fact that it's a bee church. It's only an environment for the characters to run around in. I have dedicated my life and sacrificed my mental well-being to this. I didn't even have a name for the film until halfway through stocking the bookshelves. That's why I have and still refer to this project as The Bee Church. It used to be just My Bee Church, but now it's The Bee Church. Definitive. I finished the character models and rigs on Christmas Day, found a cool add-on to make some jiggly hair, and completed the animation for the first scene in time for the new year. That emboldened me. If I could get all that done in 6 days, then I could safely estimate that I would have the rest of the animation done by mid to late January. I had to. I already promised all my teachers that I would definitely have a few weeks dedicated to my holiday homework while the bee church was rendering. That didn't happen. The 1-year anniversary of me starting Blender came along, and I couldn't just let that float by, so I made a quick little animation using the spring bones from earlier to make a bouncy abdomen. But this is where I learned that it doesn't actually work if you're rendering with cycles. I really should have paid attention to the bit that said, not for animation. I wouldn't have noticed this until I rendered the whole bee church for real if it weren't for that. Annoyingly, it looks so good in Eevee. The end of the holidays were nearing, and I managed to burn myself out just in time for the beginning of the school year. And you know what bit I was up to? This. And I was stuck. For weeks. I got frustrated every time I couldn't get it perfect and entered a cycle where I'd animate this bit all day, see that it sucks, delete it all, and then start over the next morning. I felt so defeated that I had to take a break and edit the mob scenes from Halloween Kills to Danger Danger from My Little Pony just so I could get that sweet, sweet sense of accomplishment that I had been lacking for so long. I lost all motivation to do anything but the bee church, and I couldn't even do that because it had fried my brain. And then school began. And I started the year just as burnt out as I'd ended the last, and that's saying something. So now I couldn't get any work done even if you held a gun to my head. All I could think about was the bee church. I forced myself to stop and rest. I felt better, so again, I thought I could get it done by the end of term 1. My family and I were going away for the holidays, so that would be the perfect time to start rendering, right? I could get it done in time for that, right? Right? That holiday I was supposed to render over was the very first time since before I'd began where I'd gone a whole day without touching it, and I went into bee church withdrawal. I had worked on this every single day for 7 months, and it was still not done. People were giving up on me. They started to doubt that I could ever get it finished. I knew for a fact that it'd be done eventually, because there's only so much that I actually can do. I got back home from the holiday, found the light and glory of our Lord Barry B. Benson once more, and worked tirelessly in his name. This time actually doing some schoolwork too, for once. I was being much more healthy, but then it was time for me to start work on my final project for Year 12 media, what I refer to, like the Bee Church, as the scones, despite already having a title of 10,000 scones from the moment of its very inception. Suddenly, the Bee Church and the scones were competing for my time. And since the scones was an actual school thing that was a set due date, it took priority. Working on the B church was reduced to just 1 hour a day while the rest of my time was dedicated to the scones. Then I saw that I only had 3-ish months to complete it, and the B church was abruptly squeezed out of my schedule entirely. But no day went by where I didn't think about my one true love. I proceeded to work on the scones for 3 months straight, working 5 hours a day on school days, and about 15 hours a day when I'd had no school. I even stayed home alone while the rest of my family went to Queensland for a week and a half, working 16 hours a day, every day, completely home alone, with nothing but my cats to keep me sane. I live on the edge of nowhere, so I didn't see a single other human being that whole time. I managed to model everything, animate everything, render everything, and edit everything in the span of 4 months total, and handed in with no more than 15 minutes to spare. Even with so many ovens that I had to keep them in separate files because it would crash every 6 seconds if there were more than 5 ovens existing at one time. The animation in the scones was just as complex as the B church, and since I'd finished that from start to finish in 4 months, that revitalized my faith in myself. Maybe I could get the rest of the B church done that quick too! Already my skills as an animator had gotten this far just from working on the B church, and after the scones, I'd gotten even better. Also, it got into the top 20 best short films out of 200 across the entire state. Just wanted to brag about that. Anyway, so all I accomplished with the B church in that 4-month period was this. That may seem like a fraction of a second to you, but in reality, that was 4 months. 4 whole months of being trapped in stasis, right on the exact margin between life and death. Stuck in a plane of existence in which nothing can move, nothing can progress, and yet time continues to march onward, dragging your consciousness along behind it, feeling every second as it melts away with nothing to show that it ever came to pass. Staring into the face of instant death held in front of your nose, almost in mockery. A fate with infinite patience, smugly aware that you can't escape no matter how hard you will yourself to move. Forced to permanently look your fate in the eye while the air in your lungs is frozen solid and stale. Abandoned by your creator, having never had the chance to fulfill your purpose. Unable to call for help, left alone to rot alive in a soundless scream. Oh, what a cruel curse your existence is, trapped in a splinter of time, abandoned and to your knowledge, forgotten, never knowing how, never knowing why. And then I came back and added this plate of scones to represent where I halted work on the B church. But then I had exams! Again! That's 2 whole exam periods the B church has seen me through, marking a 1.5 years of work on one project. Last time, I did not do well. I prayed to our Lord Barry B. Benson, and actually did better in my exams this year, which is extra good because they were my final exams, and then I graduated. The B church was there to see me graduate. But now, this massive interruption had thrown me off, and every day I tried to work on it, I would get distracted and achieve nothing. And suddenly I had things to do every day, and all of these weird adult responsibilities. And it absolutely didn't help that I was in the middle of a bit that I didn't bother storyboarding since I thought of it while animating, and because of the scones, I forgot what camera angles I intended to use, so I kept falling into a spiral of discontentment every time I failed to figure out what June 2022 me wanted. I was achieving so little in the B church by the beginning of 2023 that I had to go on a spiritual retreat to an isolated place with no internet in order to force myself to work. Only then I finally made some progress, and I learned that I truly do have an internet addiction. I worked so hard that I got exhausted and actually burnt out again from only 4 days this time. And I actually felt that I needed to take a break from the B church. I've already taken a big enough break! So I took a break and spent that time on another project. Remember this lip-syncing video and this animation test? Well, I originally intended to do that animation test to ensure that the rig was okay, and then I was going to animate it to one of the songs that I used in the lip-sync test. That was over a year ago, and I never did it because the B church took over just as I was going to begin. My new jacket model is already old and outdated. Anyway, so I set up the lip-shaped keys for that, returned from my spiritual journey, and life continued as normal. I eventually remembered what I intended with the camera angles, so I finally got past that. Except now, Blender has decided to be so quirky as to stop and go when I tried to watch the animation, making it nigh impossible to know what I'm even doing, so I had to render portions of the animation if I wanted to know what the hell I was doing at all. On top of all this, in the time that it's taken me to make the Bee Church, my preferred mode of listening to sick tunes, groove music, got updated and replaced with Windows Media Player. 1, it looks shit. 2, it plays both video and audio files, and can only manage one at a time. So now, I can't listen to music if I, God forbid, want to know what I'm doing. And yes, I am aware that groove music was shit from the get-go, but it was my shit. This file player saw me through thick and thin, from starting my epic Nether Fortress world, to losing my epic Nether Fortress world, to building a new epic Nether Fortress world, working on all my other animations, and of course, building the Bee Church. Groove was special to me, and now it's gone. Now I have to go find an alternate MP3 software to— oh my god! Anyway, you may think that since I'm this far in, that I must have done the voice acting ages ago. You're supposed to do that before you even begin animating. And you can see here that I've already done some lip syncing. Wow, look at that movement. Ah, but you see, I have deceived you. I have not uttered a word of the script. You thought I did. I have fooled you. Well, I can't run from it any longer, so I've got to voice act now. I can't get an actual recording booth, but I can scream in my car. The voice recording itself only takes about 5 minutes, but it took me multiple days anyway because I hate hearing my own voice, so I couldn't make myself listen to and edit it. And then I had to re-record bits multiple times, which then took even more time. I finally got it done, cleaned up the audio in Audacity, and brought them into Blender. I adjusted the blind lip sync and lip synced the bits that, up until this point, looked like this, and it was finally out of the way. The lip sync is done, the animation is done. Now to get on to the one thing that I truly intended to leave till the end. The bookshelf simulation. I had never done a physics simulation before, so I brought the bookshelf into a different project and faffed around with it there, which worked out great, so I thought I could easily just do the same thing in the actual Bee Church. Apparently not, so I went over to my brother's place to see if we could put our minds together and fix it. We had an argument and ended up working separately and competing to see who could create a better looking simulation first. We finished at the exact same time with the same product, so we did twice the work to achieve the same thing. The only difference seems to be that my books weren't levitating, so I ended up using my own simulation for the final render. And as I was nearing the end, I started getting bouts of hopelessness, just thinking about how different my life is now from when I started. I moved from year 11 to year 12, completed a whole different short film, and then graduated, and all the friends that had accompanied me on this religious journey faded away, and I was left all by myself. Just myself and the Bee Church that I'd been working on for so long. It's been my life for 2 whole years. Things have changed so much, but the Bee Church has remained a constant. And soon, it would be completed, and no longer a part of my life. It's been going on indefinitely, but now, there is a visible end. That end was just over the hill of rendering. Let's see how long my PC takes to render an image. About an hour. 1 hour per frame for 3,164 frames is over 4 months. That's because I've got a GTX 1060, but my brother has a 3080, which can render one of my frames in just 4 minutes. So obviously we arranged to divide the frames between our computers and render together. I'm rendering frames 0 to 100, while he renders everything else. And instead of taking over 4 months' time, rendering should now only take 8.5 days. While that was happening, I recorded the sound effects. Let's meet our lovely stars playing all the key sounds. We've got a delicious plate of porridge, a pile of imported lolly wrappers, the gas tank, the broken glass I used to play with as a child, my Doc Martens that I still haven't worn in, these pots, and introducing this wall. Every single sound effect you hear in this short film, except for the spotlight and Slutty Bee's wing fluttering, were performed and recorded by me. On the final day of rendering, I spilled yogurt in my backpack, but that's unrelated. It was finally time to put mine and my brother's frames together. I've just got to download them. Okay, we'll try again. After traveling 2 hours both ways to get to my brother's place, now it's finally time to put the frames together. And I forgot to render the opening shot. 2 days later, everything is rendered. All the frames are put together, and all the color grading is done. And only now, I can actually edit the sound in. And I didn't finish recording, so I still had to record sound through this process. Let's go get those recordings of this SD card, shall we? Turns out this is just a particularly shit SD card. So I went back to the shop, returned it, got a reliable one, got back to work, spent the next day going to uni and then a Halloween party, but then I had an assignment which took up my whole weekend, and then I made the mistake of taking a day off because the next day it's raining, so I still can't record. Then the next day, the weather was fine. I set up my little recording studio, made some porridge to vigorously rub for sound effects, put the micro SD in the microphone, and it's invalid. Then I remembered that I didn't format it, so I do that, put it back in, and it's still invalid. Then I argue with my brother about it for almost half an hour and get nowhere, but I loosely mentioned it to my friend, and he finds the issue in under a minute. H1Ns are incompatible with SD cards larger than 32 gigabytes. So I had to go back to the shop, but then I looked over and saw the 32 gigabyte micro SD that had been floating around my desk since May. So I recorded the sounds, edited the sounds, recorded some more sounds, edited those sounds, re-recorded a few of my sounds because they sucked, rinse and repeat for 27 days apparently. So the sound editing is finally done. Now we can move on to... Wait. It's done. There is no other step. The Bee Church is done. I'm free. Time to show people before I upload it to YouTube. Everyone is blown away. All my friends are wowed beyond belief. My VFX teacher was impressed by my squash and stretch, even though both the rigs were very rigid and had no bones for squishing. Like on this professionally made rig, it's got stuff specifically set up to be squishy and weird. Neither of my rigs have anything like that. Additionally, some people thought the way I got Slug to slither so smoothly was with a curve modifier. In reality, I just scribbled on the floor and individually aligned her bones by hand. I didn't know how to animate with curves. Everything but the bookshelf was done by hand. All of this animation was by hand, the modeling was by hand, I sculpted Barry, Adam, and Vanessa's faces all by hand, with plenty of references, and all those books were placed by hand. That was the first simulation I'd ever done in my life. Also, all this was done by hand. There is absolutely nothing that connects these rigs. I aligned the bones with each other and keyframed every frame. I may as well have done this in stop motion. Additionally, every time the camera angle changes, that's the camera teleporting around. I did not know that you could use two cameras in the same scene. And then I showed my dad, because outside perspectives are important, and he says that it makes no sense and is really hard to follow, and that my scones animation was great because it had a story, characters you could connect to, and was easy to follow. But the Bee Church was none of that, and the lack of any explanation as to why anything is happening is distracting. And now that I was thinking about it, I realized that everyone I've shown this to who wasn't forcefully dragged along for the whole making process reacted with a confused laugh, like, ha 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 ha, yeah, cool! I got lost in the source. What's the solution? I can't leave the Bee Church in this state. This project has been my entire life for 2 whole years, and this is what I have to show for my work. I got so caught up with it, I never stopped to think about whether any of it made any sense. Alright, take that down. Bee Church, not done. Bee Church, still ongoing. Originally, my main goal was to hint at a lead up through environmental storytelling, with the church a mess from the 2 characters taking over the place. Every slot in the honeycomb is empty, showing that they've consumed all the food and now need to go somewhere else to find more, and this smashed bit of honey crystal, alluding to how Slutty Bee has turned into a savage monster. Looking at it with renewed eyes, I really don't think that conveys enough. To fix this, I'll add some more dialogue. This one can yell into nothing a bit more and allude to their relationship and what they're doing here. And I really have to change Slutty Bee's name. Slutty B does not register to anyone as a name, so I changed it to Vicky, because the night after all this, I had a weird, incomprehensible nightmare where I was falling down a slide or something while some disembodied voice repeatedly said, "It's unevocably raining." So Vicky it is. All this new dialogue I need to add means that I'll somehow have to magic up more time for her to say it. I know! I can have her walk through a hallway yelling out for Vicky, and at the same time I can have her walk past bas-reliefs that allude to the Bee Church's mythology, as well as what happens to Vicky if she doesn't eat constantly. I can even have a dried up bee exoskeleton from when they took over, and Slug can smugly flick the skull over to communicate her lack of respect and disdain for the bees. I may as well have discarded bee limbs scattered on the floor everywhere, left over from when Vicky ate all the bees. Oh no, but now this one scene with all the bee limbs and murals will look out of place because no other part of the bee church has bee limbs or murals. You know what? I think I'll just re-render the whole thing. I can have murals everywhere, on every wall, and mess everywhere, and piles of bee limbs. And while Slug is slithering down the hall, Vicky will turn on some music in the main church, and this is to lure Slug to her, and this way I can pay homage to the music I was listening to during the beginning of the modeling process. I can make a bee church record player. This is great! I'm so smart! I can definitely get all of this done! I wanted to tell the story through some actual better environmental storytelling, and I really did not exceed with that in the first draft of the bee church. So I made this entire bee model and was going to add the discarded bee parts everywhere to hint towards the carnage that ensued as Vicky and the other one took over the hive. These were the bas-relief designs I came up with to illustrate the culture and religion of the beehive and even foreshadow what was going to happen. Like, this would appear on a wall, so would this. And then these would go over the walls at the end of the honey crystals to create some visual intrigue and irony, with all the bees pointing and gawking at whatever's in the doorway, that being Vicky. I thought, just to really spell it out to people, that I should have a mural warning us to not trust Vicky. I had a few designs, but I never settled between these two. I wrote multiple sets of additional dialogue for Slug. I even already started on this mural, a bee jazz band based on this image. But trying to model this bas-relief proved too difficult and time-consuming and really opened my eyes to just how much work I've set myself up for. How much longer will this take? A couple of months? Another whole year? I just wanted to be done with this. And I already was done with this. And then I'd shoveled more work onto myself. At this rate, I'll never escape the bee church. I didn't know what to do, because this was important. It would make the bee church so much better. So much more comprehensible. But, funny enough, I do in fact want to do other things with my life. So it would be a little nice if I could just stop here. But I couldn't decide, so I had to go on another soul-seeking journey to figure it out. When I came back, I ultimately decided to just re-record the voice lines and be done with it. I did, however, leave in some discarded bee parts as an homage to these 3 months of wasted time. I finished that, re-lip-synced, and now I could finally render. Again. There are about 5 shots that I've changed and 788 frames between all of them. At 50 minutes per frame, that would take me 27 days. I felt bad about abusing my brother's beefy PC, because when you're rendering, your computer is basically out of action until it's done. But luckily, my university has a bunch of really good computers that we're allowed to use. And boy do I have a story to tell about that. So, the first time I tried to go render, I forgot that it was Australia Day and that the campus was closed. So I came back the following Monday. I tried to install Blender onto the computers, but they asked for an admin login, which I do not have. So I went asking around for a login, and found out that the computers are controlled by the IT department, and they don't allow anyone to install anything on them. So I went home, mentally preparing myself for the excruciatingly long process of rendering it on my own computer, but decided to just ask my brother if he's up for rendering the bee church again on his PC, to which he obliged. So I sent him the file, we split up the frames again, and he rendered his part in just over 2 days. I got the frames back from him, and turned out I forgot to tell him to unhide the floor grunge folder, so then we had to render it again. But I didn't want to keep him from his own projects for any longer, so I emailed my uni's IT department begging to use the computers, which I really should have done in the first place, and they said yes, as long as I used the portable version, because they're worried about installing 3.4 messing up with the 4.0 version that they've already recently installed. which it won't. You can have multiple versions of Blender on a computer at once with no issue, but I'm not going to argue with them. I came back, installed Blender, finally got to rendering, slapped a bunch of sticky notes on the monitors, and went home. I came back in the next day for class and found that someone had turned off my goddamn computers despite the notes. I turned them back on, went to class for 2 hours, came back, and learned that I forgot to turn on optics, so I achieved nothing in that time. So I turned on optics, was about to leave, but looking at my track record, something is guaranteed to go wrong. So I like to stick around in the city and come back in an hour or two just to be safe. Lo and behold, I came back and the render directory was set to a file on my external hard drive, which, you may notice, is not there, so still it rendered nothing. I set the correct path, stuck around for an extra 10 minutes just to be safe, and then I finally got to go home. But with these delays, instead of having my rendering finished that afternoon like I anticipated, it would have been done the following Tuesday morning. And I had specifically planned to not do anything on that Tuesday. I woke up and contemplated getting them on Thursday, the next time that I actually had to go in. But then I thought, screw it, I will get them today. On the train there, something important got struck by lightning, and we were delayed by 28 minutes. I got to uni, all was well, I obtained the frames, went ice skating, had some ice cream, and then my train got cancelled. And then the one after that got cancelled. And then finally a train arrived after waiting a total of 40 minutes instead of 20. After the whole line lost power, and getting delayed for 1 hour and 6 minutes, I finally got home. I could finally finish the Bee Church. If there wasn't a power out for the next 2 days, God is punishing me for making the Bee Church. Power came back on. I slapped the frames in the folder, opened it in Davinci, color corrected it again, and hit render. Check that the file is still there. Yes, it is very much there. What could the problem... Oh, some of the frames are missing somehow. How would I have not noticed them not rendering? So I tried to render those frames out on mine and my brother's PCs. I woke up the next morning and saw that I had accidentally set it to render the wrong range of frames. Smashed my head against the desk. Went and rendered 18 frames at uni that day so I could have them ready by that afternoon and hopefully done that evening. I put my frames onto render, attended class, finished class, collected my frames, and as I was about to leave, I looked back at the computer and thought, man, it would be so inconvenient if there was somehow yet another thing that went wrong with what my brother rendered and I would still have to re-render those frames again. Which wouldn't be too much of a problem with these computers, except I would have come into the city almost every single day for 2 weeks. I do not want to come in again tomorrow just to render stuff. But I could be safe and render it all here and now, but maybe it's all fine and rendering these frames on these computers would be pointless. But then again, I have run into so many walls at every single turn of this whole operation that statistically, it is guaranteed that something will go wrong. So I went home without rendering those frames. My brother decided to name the frames something different because he didn't want to be like other girls, which is annoying but is also an easy fix. And now with the new frames from my brother, we can put those in and oh, what the fuck. We re-rendered it for the 4th time. I got my frames, color corrected them, replaced the old animation with the new, tried to realign all the SFX, and somehow messed the whole thing up in the process. No worries, I'll just revert to my last save and oh god, Davinci saves automatically. No worries, I can just pull up the file from my last backup and oh god, Davinci uses a bullshit database instead of saving something as an individual file. Well, the sound effects are permanently screwed and I can't fix them in any way other than individually resynchronizing every single sound. No worries, that shouldn't take more than 2 days. How did that take more than a week? And now, it's done. I fully intend to remake the Bee Church when I'm an actual professional, but I do not want to touch this again for at least 10 years. So see you suckers in 2034. Having the 2030s as a decade really does not vibe with me. I sure hope nothing bad happens. Also, my mum suggested that I change the title to something else since it is really confusing. Some of her suggestions include, When the Honey Pot Runs Dry, Sorry for What I Did When I Was Hangry, The Hangry Honey Pot, and The Very Hangry Honey Pot. But it's too late now, I need that title for the joke at the end. This whole operation was partially inspired by Halloween Kills. If I had not listened to Unkillable, I would still have my sanity, and acceptable grades, and would have probably achieved a lot more in the last 3 years. And in the time between the beginning of my B Church and the release of the movie, I became obsessively intent on seeing it in theaters. It was actually the first movie I saw at the cinemas since before lockdown, and you will not know the insanely complicated and frankly ridiculous story of how I managed to see it, because I won't tell you. Anyway, I eventually got to see Halloween Kills, the movie that has nothing to do with bees, but is the partial inspiration behind my bee church, which has stolen my life. Bees are completely irrelevant to Michael Myers. No bees here! Guess what happens? 2 characters sit down and have a completely random conversation, completely unrelated to anything else in the movie.
The waggle dance is how bees communicate. They share the information where the flower is with the rest of the colony. My mom kept bees before she died.
What kind of trans-temporally convergent bullfuckery is this? Why are the gay pirates talking about bees? Why did the filmmakers choose bees of all topics? What? Bees! Bees! Ah! Anyway, I enjoyed the hell out of that movie. It's absolutely not the greatest thing ever created, but it makes me so happy. It was the first thing in a very long time that I had been really excited for, and it did not let me down. I kinda actually forgot what it felt like to be genuinely excited. Funny story, when the movie ended, someone sitting behind me said, "Well, that sucked." And mere seconds later, someone else walking up the aisle said, "That was a good movie." And if that doesn't encapsulate the general reception of Halloween Kills, I don't know what will. So yeah, the B Church is finished, and now I am purposeless.